Hello everyone! Today I am going to show you my recipe of how to make Vietnamese pork paste. We also call it Giò Sống. Vietnamese pork paste is the base to traditional Vietnamese pork ham that we call Chả Lụa. If you've ever had one of the Vietnamese sandwiches, the bánh mì before, you are bound to have the Chả Lụa before. That's the Vietnamese ham. So the Giò Sống is what you use to make the ham, but you can use the Giò Sống or the uncooked pork paste for other dishes as well. One of the other favorite dishes in Vietnam that we use the Chả Lụa or the Giò Sống for is the spicy beef soup Bún Bò Huế. And there are so many dishes that you can use the pork paste for. So the taste is absolutely important with the Giò Sống, but with so many dishes in Vietnam, the taste is equivalent, important, but just like many other Vietnamese recipes, as important as the taste is, the texture is just as important. And the texture that we are looking for the pork paste or the Giò Sống is the little springy, slightly chewy, but more springy kind of texture. And so I will show you the secrets that I use in order to make the texture as well as the taste just right. So the ingredients are very, very simple. You probably already have all of these ingredients in your pantry. It's going to come down to technique. But let me walk you through the list of ingredients. So my recipe is for 2 pounds of ground pork. I am using 80-20 ground pork, so 20% fat. You want to have some fat in this meat because otherwise it's gonna dry out. Okay, so to my 2 pounds of ground pork, I am going to be adding 3 tablespoons of sugar. I'm using some organic cane sugar today. You can use any sugar you prefer. I am going to be adding 1 teaspoon of baking powder. So this is just the regular baking powder that you get at the American grocery stores. It doesn't have to be the single acting baking powder, the one that comes in the pink package if you've ever seen it, that you buy at the Asian store. I'm just using regular baking powder. I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of mushroom seasoning. I am always using mushroom seasonings instead of using chicken powder, just because this mushroom seasoning is literally just 100% mushroom. There's no added ingredients to it. So those were our dry ingredients. So I'm going to add 4 tablespoons of vegetable oil. I'm using a beautiful avocado oil. I love avocado oil. It's very flavorless, and you can add it without it smelling like a specific type of oil. Of course, we're gonna have 2.5 tablespoons of fish sauce. Really, really important. About almost all Vietnamese recipes use fish sauce. So I'm using the 3 Crab brand. That's my favorite, but use any brand that you prefer. And here is the first tip, or my first secret to getting the texture just right. The water. You're going to be using 6 tablespoons of water, and the water has to be cold. I'm using ice cubes in my water. I put it in the refrigerator before usage. You want the water cold. You want the meat cold. You want the water cold. You want this to be cold at all times. If the meat comes down to room temperature and it's not cold anymore, it will not come out with the right texture. Okay, so now I'm going to mix all of these ingredients and massage it into the meat. Massage it until you really don't see any more liquid ingredients left, until it's nicely absorbed by the meat. So my tip, another tip of mine, is going to be divide the 2 pounds of pork into 2 bags. Two reasons why I do that. First of all, we want to be able to flatten the meat out as thinly as possible in the bag. And we put it in the freezer. So by dividing it in two bags, it's going to freeze faster. Second of all, when you blend or mix the meat in the next step, it is much easier to break the meat apart since it's such a thin layer, and your food processor or standing mixer will have a much easier time in regards to processing the meat versus just putting 2 pounds in a big bag. It makes it actually harder on the machine. So the meat is nice and flat, and I am going to be putting that in my freezer for about 2 to 3 hours. Once the meat has been in the freezer for 2 to 3 hours, the meat is super, super, super cold, but it is not frozen. And that is what you're looking for. And that is going to be your secret in getting the springy texture that we're always looking for in this specific recipe. Okay, so almost 3 hours later, this is what my meat looks like coming out of the freezer. So this is what you guys looking for, okay? The meat is super, super, super cold, but it's not entirely frozen. So when you break it into little pieces, you can tell the texture. It's kind of crunchy, okay? It so kind of breaks into pieces. It's not chewy or gooey or flexible anymore. It's literally, it is almost frozen. So that is the texture I am looking for to make sure that it has the right consistency. So you can either use your food processor or your standing mixer for the next step. I'm going to be using my standing mixer today. If you use a food processor, remember to pulse the processor. Don't just let it go and let it blend. You want to pulse it, because the one thing, remember, is we always want the meat to be very, very cold. So want to make sure that your appliance stays cool as well. So I'm just going to get started by putting it on the lowest possible setting. You're going to see at first, it's going to jump all over the place sometimes. So use your hands or put a little towel over it in this first 30 seconds so the meat doesn't jump out of your bowl. So after about a minute, the meat is just starting to come together a little bit, and then I raise it to a medium speed setting, maybe a 3 or 4, and I let it go for 3 to 4 minutes. Now don't forget to scrape your bowl from time to time to make sure that the meat gets mixed thoroughly. Okay, so this is what the meat kind of looks like after about a total mixing time of about 4 minutes. You can see that the meat is starting to become a finer texture. You can still see chunks here, so I'm definitely going to keep going, but you can see the texture when you try to pick it up with your spatula or your spoon. It kind of like stretchy, and that stretchy kind of texture is that springy texture that you're looking for. Okay, so I am going to increase the speed setting on my standing mixer, and I'm going to let it go for another 3 to 4 minutes, and from time to time scraping down the bowl. Okay, my Giò Sống is done. So this batch I made today, I'm going to actually fry it up to make chả chiên. Okay, so my texture does not need to be like super, super fine. This is perfectly fine for me. You see just small little meat pieces here and there, and I'm totally fine with that. But when I use the Giò Sống to make Chả Lụa, the steamed pork ham, I'll definitely would whip it a little bit longer to get it to a really, really nice and fine texture. So anyhow, I hope you guys found this tutorial helpful. If you learned something, I would love for you to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. The tips that I gave you, I've tried them many times. So test it out, leave me a comment. Let me know if you have any questions or if you need help at all. I am so looking forward to you guys tuning in next week again. Thanks so much. See you later, alligator.